Although Bulgakov is universally regarded as one of the greatest writers of the 20th century, he never achieved the fame he deserved. Even today, even though his talent has been unanimously recognized by critics, he is and still one of the most famous Russian authors, and only a few readers are familiar with his dramas, his short satirical stories, and the two novels written before his masterpiece, The Master and Margarita. Therefore, the purpose of this paper is to recall the main stages of his personal and artistic life, and to explore his relationship with power, while analyzing his works in relation. Bulgakov was born in the last decade of the 19th century, when the Russian Empire was still an extremely backward country compared to the other major powers, both from a cultural and economic point of view. He experienced firsthand the heavy repercussions of firstly the outbreak of the First World War, then the 1917 February and October Revolution resulted in the overthrow of Tsarist power and the seizure of power by Soviets, the outbreak of a bloody 2-year civil war, and lastly, Stalin's dictatorship, based on the use of terror and violence, as well as the widespread surveillance of the population. This was undoubtedly one of the darkest pages of Russian history, which, while on one hand contributed to making the country an industrial and military superpower, on the other one suppressed every form of freedom, sentencing to death millions of alleged enemies of the people. The first work analyzed, A Young Doctor's Notebook, is inspired by the young author's personal experience as a director of a rural hospital in a remote corner of the empire, while the second one, Notes on a Cuff and Other Stories, depicts the Moscow of the early 20s, underlying the contrast between the new rich and starving old intellectuals. The third one, The White Guard, focuses on the violence of the civil war in Ukraine, which Bulgakov witnessed with his own eyes. The last two works, theatrical novel and The Famous Master and Margarita, are, like the previous ones, clearly autobiographical, referring respectively to the author's experience at the Moscow Art Theatre and his huge difficulties with Soviet censorship. None of his works was published from the end of the 20s to 1961, when some of his short stories and plays began to be printed. Only in the 80s, 40 years after his death, thanks to a growing interest in his works, scholars and critics worldwide started to revise and compare all his manuscripts and notes, as well as to bring to light those still unpublished, seized by the KGB and hidden in Soviet archives for many years, contributing to making him one of the most prominent authors of 20th century. The fact that it took a long time for his talent to be finally recognized was mainly due to the absence of a complete biography, crucial to fully understand his novels and plays, which was first published by the Russian critic Marietta Chudakova, which was and still remains today the most comprehensive study of the writer's life ever conducted. Despite the harsh persecution he experienced throughout his lifetime, the tenacious Russian writer never renounced his characteristic satirical tone, nor did he deny his ideas. It is thanks to his works, the same which condemned him to isolation and violent persecution, that Bulgakov and his heroes finally got their revenge against the regime by becoming immortal and eternally famous.